This is WEFT Champaign, 90.1 FM, community radio for East Central Illinois, streaming live at www.weft.org. The views and opinions expressed here are those of the speakers and do not necessarily represent those of WFT, its board of directors, associates, its station manager, or Prairie Air Incorporated. The following program is pre-recorded and consists of two parts. The first part is a rebroadcast of a program originally aired in 2011. The second part was recorded on July 8th, 2015. Welcome to Weekend Heartbeat. I'm Sean David, and this is a new lamp.
New lamp for old. New lamp for old. Remember how Aladdin headed out to get oil for his mother's old dented, tarnished lamp? And in the market he met a magician calling out these words. This strange man was offering to give him a brand new shiny lamp for his old one. That's what I want to offer you, if you'll have it. A new lamp of spiritual guidance. But maybe you already have such a lamp, which still burns brightly. Great. You are still welcome to join us simply to learn who we are. But maybe your lamp of divine guidance has gotten dented and tarnished like Aladdin's. Or perhaps you have no such lamp at all. To you, I offer a new lamp. Hi, my name is Marilyn. Welcome to A New Lamp, a program designed to make you acquainted with the Baha'i religious faith. I hope you will choose to spend the next few minutes with me. Thanks.
Whither can a lover go but to the land of his beloved? And what seeker findeth rest away from his heart's desire? To the true lover, reunion is life. To the true lover, separation is death. His breast is void of patience, and his heart hath no peace. His breast is void of patience, and his heart hath no peace. A myriad lives he would forsake to hasten. A myriad lives he would forsake to hasten to the abode of his beloved.
At the time and place Baha'u'llah lived, his laws regarding marriage and divorce were quite radical. At that time, wealthy men had harems and children by the dozens. Women's rights were negligible, and a man could easily divorce her. Can you imagine the household struggles with jealousy among the women and their children? We saw such problems among Old Testament patriarchs. Can you imagine a man being told he can have but one wife? Well, here it is, monogamy. Because there is no way any man can keep harmony and fairness any other way. Marriage is encouraged, but not obligatory. There are no prohibitions against marriage between the races or with non-Baha'is. The age of maturity for Baha'is is 15 years, and marriage may be contracted any time after that age has been reached. Marriage is not arranged, but determined by the affection between the individuals themselves on condition that it is approved by both sets of parents. This law applies no matter the age of the bride and groom. The purpose of this law is to prevent rancor and enmity and to preserve unity. The main purpose of marriage is to develop a family, and couples are encouraged to have children. Once the decision to wed has been made, the wedding must take place within 95 days. The marriage ceremony is simple. As we have no clergy, the recitation by both parties is said to this effect: "We will all, verily, abide by the will of God." The couple may choose to add to the ceremony appropriate readings and music. These marriages are legal, this matter having been tended years ago. The laws of Baha'u'llah place much emphasis on the consideration of the husband toward his wife. For example, he is not to leave her without telling her how long he will be gone. If he abandons her, she may remarry in 9 months. Also such things as financial matters, equitable legalities, and general respect and thoughtfulness. Baha'u'llah has said, "Truly the Lord loveth union and harmony, and abhorreth separation and divorce. Live ye one with another, O people, in radiance and joy. Compose your differences, O my servants." So divorce is strongly discouraged, but if things come to pass that the parties become estranged and want to divorce, they must wait separately 1 year of patience before this can take place. Neither husband or wife may take another mate during this time. Perhaps reconciliation will take place. Now on to the matters of funerals. The body, no matter what its condition, is to be treated with respect. It has been the temple for the soul during its earthly life. Burial in a good casket is prescribed. Cremation is not allowed. The body is not to be embalmed, but washed and shrouded in silk or fine cotton. A burial ring is placed on the finger, which says in effect, "I came forth from God, and unto him I return." Burial should take place within 24 hours if possible, and the body entombed within 1 hour's travel time from the place of death. The prayer for the dead is said just prior to interment. Death is not to be feared. As our life in the womb prepared us for life on this earth, so has our sojourn here prepared us for a beautiful unknown, the all-glorious Appa Kingdom.
I'm gonna thank you for my journey.
O Son of the Supreme, I have made death a messenger of joy to thee. Wherefore dost thou grieve? I made the light to shed on thee its splendor. Why dost thou veil thyself therefrom? Baha'u'llah. Thanks so much for being with me this morning. I hope you have found a blessing during these few minutes. If you want to learn more about the Baha'i religion, you can go online to www.bahai.us. To contact me, my email address is anewlamp@yahoo.com. Thanks, and have a great day. Welcome, everyone, to our July edition of A New Lamp. Our guest today is Bill Baker. We have previously had as our guests his mother, Amy Felty, and last month his sister, Zivar Guillot, and his 3 nieces. This extended family has been active in the Champaign-Urbana area a long while, and we still have more to go. A big welcome, Bill.
Hi, I'm so glad to be here. Thank you.
Hey, Bill, how you doing?
Hi, Sean.
We always like to give our listeners a chance to learn a little bit about our guests. Just such things as family, education, career, or any information you think they might be interested in. You want to fill us in a little bit about who you are?
Well, I first came to Champaign-Urbana when I was about 12 years old. I came here for high school. I'd gotten into uni, and my mom said, you should go. I went there, and I had a great time. But we don't live there, and so I came and I lived with my grandparents. And I've been here on and off for, it's been 30 years or more. Went to Boston, came back. Now we're off to China, and eventually we'll probably come back. My grandparents have a farm here, and the farm just doesn't move. So it's kind of it has a gravitational pull.
That's great. Okay, and education, did you go to college here?
I went off to Boston for university.
Oh, I guess maybe you said that. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I studied engineering. I ended up studying computer programming. After I graduated from college, I worked for a few years in Boston and then accidentally got a job at the university. I had been planning to move to Lithuania, and my mom insisted that I practice my interview skills. And while I was in Lithuania learning that I was unemployable there because I didn't have management experience or language skills, I got a call that said, yeah, we'd like to hire you at the university. And we have this emotional computing research project at Beckman Institute. And so I came back and I did that for a year and a half. And in the meantime, met a graduate student who I later married, Bahia Phillips. And we lived in Urbana for a good 15 years. Raising kids. We had 3 daughters. When our daughters were old enough, she said, okay, I'm ready to go to China. And I had heard about this plan before, and I was kind of warming up to it. And finally, I said, okay, I'm ready to go too. And we looked at everything. We decided we wanted to cut our ties here, at least physical ones, such as owning a house. We didn't want to be long-distance landlords. So we took about a year to prepare. And in 2011... finally moved. And so we've been in China for 4 years. We've been back a couple times to visit. This is our second visit. It's a very rainy July, to our surprise. I brought hot weather clothes, and I have shivered my way through this July in Illinois.
Yeah, it is. Actually, last year was not typical either. I don't think there is such a thing as typical anymore.
What have you done to our weather while we were gone?
Oh, dear. Oh, gosh. Oh, we have learned already that the Baker family has a long Baha'i history, dating back 6 generations for you and 7 generations for your daughter.
That's true. I think if you looked at a bunch of American Baha'is, you'd find about half of them had joined the Baha'i faith on their own. You know, they'd
Yes.
discovered it, they'd decided they thought it was true. And the other half were probably born into a Baha'i family. So on my mother's side, she found it on her own. And on my father's side, he's been a Baha'i boy forever. Their family, you're right, it goes back, I think he's 4th generation or 5th
Right.
or something.
Right. Zivar mentioned that there's even part of the Beecher family. That
Harriet Beecher
he-
Stowe.
Yeah.
Right. And that's not direct lineage, but those are cousins.
Yeah,
And
those are cousins.
Right.
And that family always had all sorts of crazy ideas. And
Yeah.
they would have these internal arguments about the role of women in the church and slavery. I think they were all opposed to slavery, but they certainly had their strong opinions.
Right.
And one of them, Dorothy Beecher, was born sometime around 1890. And she, with the help of her grandmother, found the Baha'i faith. And she's our ancestor who is well known as having traveled around the United States and later around the world, teaching people about the Baha'i faith and encouraging the Baha'is, because often they were given very challenging tasks. Integrate yourselves racially in North America. Oi, they'd have no idea how to do that. And, you know, this was in pre-1960s, 1920, 1930.
Quite
Jim
a
Crow was in
ways,
effect.
yes.
Yeah.
You know, it's very strong prejudices, laws against miscegenation, you know, all sorts of things they had to deal with. And Abdul Baha, who Marilyn was talking about, said very clearly to the American Baha'is, you must integrate. Your meetings must be together. When he came to visit us in 1912, he found the Baha'is meeting separately. They're like, well, it's not practical for blacks and whites to meet together, so we'll have the black Baha'i meeting and the white Baha'i meeting. And he said, oh, no. That's the central principle of this faith is unity. I'm paraphrasing a little. And he forced them. He said, you must meet together. And of course, they responded eagerly to obey, but it was
Right.
very difficult. And I think they felt they were swimming upstream often. You know, even if they, you know, you'd get 2 responses. You'd get the, yes, finally, this is what I've been waiting for. And you'd get the, oh, geez, you are crazy, and I don't think you're doing the right thing. Hold on a minute. And so she had to encourage them
Sure.
to remember the former and not the discouragement.
Right. So, having come from that kind of a background, Bill, did you find a sense of pressure that you needed to be a Baha'i because your family is Baha'i? Or do you feel like you were allowed space to explore and come to your own conclusion?
That's a good question. I mean, it's very important that anybody, you know, with any religion have a chance to explore it and figure it out for themselves. I mean, we live in an age where we have access to all the writings, you know, in the time of Jesus or even in the first 1,000 years of Christian history, people couldn't read any literature, really. I mean, most people were not literate in Christian areas, and so they needed some community leader to tell them what the Bible said and interpret it for them. And Baha'u'llah said, in this day, people are able to, well, since we're able to read, you know, we all should.
Yes.
And we should all investigate things for ourselves, and we should all study for ourselves. And I always feel like, you know, if there are a million Baha'is somewhere, there are going to be a million different Baha'i faiths there as well, because everybody's encouraged and admonished even to think on their own about it and to study it and read every morning and evening from the sacred scriptures and figure out in your own life what it means.
Yes. So, you guys have gone to China. Why? And what have your experiences been there? Why'd you go in the first place? Why'd you decide to go to China?
Well, my wife and I had both lived abroad before we got married. And then we hadn't done anything since we'd been married. We just lived in Urbana in one little block. We'd been raising children, which is an adventure in itself, but
Yes, it is.
it's a different kind. And she had always planned to go abroad once the kids were old enough. Now, one argument is take your kids when they're babies, because then they'll learn the local language and they'll get comfortable and they'll never go through a culture shock. The other point of view was get them healthy and robust so that when you go somewhere, you don't have to worry about any health emergencies because they're old enough that they'll probably be okay. So we chose the latter. And our kids now have said, you should have brought us while we're babies so we could learn Chinese natively. So
Can't win for losing.
You can't win 100%. But it's been good for them anyway. We went when our youngest was 6 years old.
Okay.
And at first we tried going to a Chinese local public school. They were very friendly. But they didn't really have a setup for immigrants, for people who were coming in and trying to learn the language and trying to mainstream. So we only did that for about a year, and the kids said, this isn't working, Mom and Dad. And so my wife found a job at an international school. It was mostly still Chinese students, but at least they were studying in English.
Yeah.
So our children could have Chinese friends, but they could study in the language they actually knew. And the school was really happy to have them. They loved having international students come in because that helped with the English language level in the school as a whole. Now, it's still a challenge for us to give our children language education because most of their teachers are Chinese even. About half and half. Some are native speakers. Some are Chinese who have learned English. But the school is aimed at language learners, people who are growing up in a Chinese family, but then learning English as part of their education, and then hoping eventually to study abroad and become part of the international population where everybody speaks English and communicates that way.
So they're speaking the classes that are taught in English. They're regular academic classes, and then they're learning Chinese outside of the school, or learning Chinese in Chinese classes. Is that what you mean?
They have a Chinese class, right?
Chinese class.
Okay.
Yeah.
Can you speak the language?
I can go shopping. And I'm not too great at deep conversations, but I can answer the regular questions you might get during the day, like where are you from? How long have you been here? And I know how to answer those.
Yeah.
And the Chinese people are very friendly about it. They're eager to speak with you.
Really?
In the city where we are, it's kind of a second-tier city, Chengdu. It's where the pandas are. There are not that many foreigners. There are enough that people are familiar with them, and our kids don't feel too uncomfortable getting a lot of attention.
Yeah.
Actually, our youngest kind of enjoys it because wherever she goes, she can make friends with anybody who's there because they're so excited to see a little foreigner kid who they can practice their English with and laugh with and have fun with.
Your oldest daughter has, as I recall, has red hair, doesn't
Yeah,
she?
she's bright red hair.
Yes.
So she stands out. But fortunately, plenty of Chinese have gotten bored with black hair and using modern chemical technology can
Really?
have just about any color they want. So she doesn't stand out as much as she might have 10 years ago.
Right. So what do you do there in China? I know you have to be earning your own living. As I should say, we're not sending out missionaries, so you
Right.
have to be able to take care of yourself and your family.
Yeah, and honestly, we're learning as much as we are sharing anything with anybody. It's been a great experience. I've been teaching in a high school. There are a lot of programs to prepare students for studying abroad. And it's a lot of fun because it's not quite so compartmentalized. I'm not the calculus teacher. I mean, that's what I teach, calculus and programming. And I'd love to be teaching statistics, but we haven't gotten that far yet. But I'm also just teaching them how to cope with Western life. And that turns out to include how to cope with life in general.
Sure.
And the classes aren't too big, so I can spend a lot of time with each individual student and just help them figure out where they want to go next. How are they going to adjust to college? How are they going to find their way in the world? Their parents are from one generation. Their grandparents survived the Cultural Revolution
Right.
and all the difficulties in China at that time, even World War II. They were recovering from that. And so there's been huge change in their
Yes.
country in the last few generations, and they are hungry for anybody who can help them relate to it. How do I relate to my parents? They have very specific desires that aren't going to be realistic in the United States because it's not what they're familiar with. And so I can help them talk it over and help them understand how to relate what they're going to find in the U.S. and to what their parents are expecting. And so I can help them be a bridge. And also, they're going to discover the future. I don't know. I'm 45. I can tell them what it was like 20 years ago, and I can tell them what university life was like for me back then.
Mm-hmm.
But they're going to have to discover it, and that's so exciting. I mean, to see these young people. I remember when I was 20, I met a lot of retirees and older people, in their 60s, 70s, 80s, who said, "Oh, I love being around you young people." And I thought, oh, yeah. And youthful energy, and now I'm in that situation. I find young people, "Oh, you young people, you're so much fun. You have so much youthful energy. You keep me...
Keep you young.
Keep me young. Let me get my cane."
Easy there. You know how old I am?
You're over 42.
Yeah, a few years over 42. So, do you have opportunity for actually teaching the faith?
Oh, all the time. Yeah, people are always interested in anything. I mean, especially if it's going to help them deal with the world as it is now. The Baha'i faith, of course, is very good for that. It directly addresses the problems the world has right now. Mm-hmm. And they'll tell me something like, "Oh, China is so oppressive and the government doesn't give us freedom. If only we did things exactly the way the United States did, everything would be perfect."
Oh.
Of course, that's a grass is greener on the other side of the fence.
Yeah.
Now, if you look at me, people will say, "Oh yeah, China," blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, actually, I kind of like some of the things they're doing there. And they, "What? You can't say that." So I think the countries can learn a lot from each other.
Right.
Obviously, the United States has some problems that we need to deal with, some of which have come from the very things we love the most, our freedom. I mean, we have the freedom to consume a gallon of corn syrup. Well, that's not so good for us.
That's right.
There are a lot of problems that we need to deal with that if we looked to China for some of the solutions, I think it might be instructive, and vice versa. I would love to see the two countries come closer together. I would love to see them both study the Baha'i faith together because I think it has a lot of answers for the problems that people are facing. In China, there's a focus on unity, but it's more of a conformity. You must obey
Right.
exactly what your parents say. And there's something there. I mean, there's harmony, but it's lacking some of the individual investigation of the future and of the truth and of what is going to be appropriate for this time.
Right.
So there's this kind of lag in social progress sometimes because people have to wait to implement something new because the people who are older are the most in charge. But that's true in the United States as well.
Yeah.
We had a guest a few months back, Marge Wilson. I don't know if you know Marge.
I know Marge, yeah.
Who has been twice in China, and she indicated that the first time she was there, things were still pretty strict, and freedom to move about was not so much. But the last time she was there, she saw quite a change in...
Yeah, China has been experimenting with freedoms. And I think the government right now has come to the conclusion that people have freedom to innovate economically, for sure. Start businesses, try out different things. Uber, for example, is big in China. I was surprised to find that out. I haven't used it yet in China. But Uber is big. Internet companies are booming. People are changing jobs all the time. But they have to be a little bit conservative with some other things. For example, moving to the countryside to the city. Of course, they want people to move to more efficient modes of employment. Subsistence farming is very inefficient of labor, and so they'd rather
Sure.
people move in and do more industrial things. But there are problems with that as well. There's problems of pollution. There are problems of overcrowding in the cities. They want to maintain the quality of life in the cities, such as access to education. There's a lot of displacement with families getting divided where the parents will go into town to work, go into the big city, maybe far away, and the children will stay behind. And the government is trying to balance economic progress and rapid social and demographic change. And you can read all about that in the Wall Street Journal
Sure.
or online, The Economist. There are many, many compromises that need to be made between, education of children and movement of labor and inequality of incomes between rural and urban. So all of that's happening. And if there's a theme in Chinese development that I see, it's that people are always saying, if it continues the way it is, things will head to disaster for sure. That's probably true, but it never continues the way it is.
Right.
They're always adjusting and changing and averting disaster and steering. And they move with a speed, the Chinese government and country move with a speed that I would not have thought possible for that large of a country. It's
Right.
1.3 billion people. It's 3 or 4 times the size of the United States.
That's scary right there.
Yeah, it is. It's huge. But they managed to do it. And of course, it's a feature of a government that has more control.
Yes.
That's something I was going to ask about your on-the-ground impressions of. I've been reading a lot about China over the last couple of years. And one of the things that strikes me is we in the United States, when we think of autocracies, we think of, I want to protect my power and my family's power and our authority over the state. And all of you little peons and the population can go rot. We don't care, just as long as we get our power. And it sounds like China is actually using their autocracy to try and improve the lives of the people there. And that seems to be their concern. Do you get that? I'm just wondering what your comments are on that. Do you get that feeling from having lived there?
So it's living in China, I'm very much on the ground.
Yeah.
If there were a terrain with grass and trees and birds flying overhead, I'm somewhere down in the grass. But my perception of life in China and of the country overall, including the government and the people and the organizations, is that there is a tension, of course, between the desires of individuals in the government for personal enrichment and the altruism and nationalism in a positive sense, wanting your nation to do well in China, which there is such a powerful love of their country and a pride in their country and their long history. The city I live in, everywhere you turn, people are saying, all right, in our 5,000-year history, which is accurate. I mean, it is 5,000 years old. There's a school there that's, thousands of years old, and it's been renewed many times, but they're so proud of this history and so confident that it will continue with triumphs in the future. And everywhere you look, people are concerned for the welfare of their fellow citizens, their fellow Chinese people. They want the environment to be clean, not just for themselves, or for their own children, but for everybody. They want it to be beautiful. They want it to advance culturally and economically. Obviously, it's advancing economically at a breakneck pace, but they want it to develop. They want to not lose their culture in the process.
Yeah.
Right. That has to be scary because they have such an ancient culture to
Yeah.
modernize. And of course, in the process, I like to say the problems with the smog and apparently very serious in some areas. They're having to use masks in some of the bigger cities and stuff. So this has to be a scary process that like say it's rapid changes and to not lose the
Right.
good things that they have.
It's scary, but it's also very exciting. You have to realize what China is coming from. They had a terrible famine, which, was probably the worst in the 20th century in terms of lives lost, just 2 generations ago. And
Yes.
there is a resolve, an iron resolve to never let that happen again. It's not spoken of very much because it's still so painful.
Yeah.
But they're very excited that it doesn't look like that will happen anytime soon. China is very far from famine right now and is advancing very quickly. So there's this excitement and sense of triumph. But there's also a sense of caution. Let's be careful to try to bring our culture forward as well. And there's also a very strong awareness, I think, that we need moral guidance. Corruption is a huge problem in China, not because China is inherently corrupt, but because of the scale of wealth that is unfolding there. I would say wealth being created, but it's not. The wealth has always been there, but it's becoming apparent. People realize how valuable their country is, and it's gaining monetary value. And sometimes people can interpose themselves between what was not valued before, such as land, and now obviously has value, and gain illegitimately in the process. And at every scale, there are issues there. Whenever there's wealth coming in, there are problems of corruption. And people realize we need some sort of moral compass. Maybe we shouldn't have gotten rid of religion. On the other hand, we've had some problems with religion before. If you study the history of Chinese revolutions, not just the Communist Revolution, but the previous ones, some of the most egregious human rights violations came from religious revolutions in the last 200 years in China.
I don't think that's too surprising.
Yes. And so they're very cautious and say, let's be careful about any kind of religion. Make sure it's not fanatical. Make sure it's not self-serving. And so when we teach the Baha'i faith in China, it's with that in mind, that we must not be self-serving. We must have the interests of the local people wherever we are. And China, it's more than just a nation. It's many nationalities all put together. And the needs are different in every place. And so the way we teach the Baha'i faith in each place is different. So fortunately, in the last couple decades in the Baha'i faith, we have been focusing on exactly that. How do you develop a moral compass in a community? Where do you start? Well, it turns out that if sociology research kind of backs it up, that you have to start with children. You start with children's classes. You teach some basic morals. These are universal morals, such as honesty. The idea of valuing honesty for its own sake, rather than just as a tool or as a symptom of something else.
Safeguard.
A safeguard, yeah. But to love the truth. You can teach that to children. You can teach children to love the truth and to think of honesty as a way of beautifying their souls.
Yes. Improving themselves.
Improve yourselves through these morals, through kindness. The Baha'i writings say, adorn yourself with the ornament of honesty. And if you teach children from an early age to value morals and to value spiritual beauty, you can help build a society where morality and working together are inherent in it. And we found many Chinese communities eager to do that, but not so eager for a foreign involvement in it. So what we have to do is just offer the barest beginnings.
Okay.
And then we find that the local communities adopt these principles and figure out ways to build communities their own way. And, it's easy to carry some new teaching somewhere and accidentally carry with it culture.
Yeah.
Let's have Protestant culture, Baha'i faith with American influences. No, that's not what we want.
Yeah.
These teachings
It has to be Chinese.
Right. These teachings came for the whole world. They weren't supposed to be overloaded with a certain cultural baggage.
Right.
And so the Chinese people are brilliant. They're so capable of taking the principles in their pure form and applying them to their own communities in ways we haven't seen yet. And it's a great field for experimentation. How do you teach children spiritual virtues? How do you incorporate principles of consultation into a community?
So this kind of answers a question then that I've been thinking about of you're in a communist country where God had been eliminated. So at this point, that is not the stress, but teaching principles rather than religion as such. In other words, the concept of God.
Yeah, yeah. We'll have a discussion of that subject exactly, of religion in China and atheism and the concept of God and communism and all that stuff. What is this airing on Saturday? So tomorrow, Sunday afternoon at the Baha'i Center. So everybody's welcome to come to that. I don't have a real agenda planned for it. It's a very interesting subject, and people all over China are rediscovering concepts of the spiritual and of God and of religion, but they're doing it in a very investigative way.
That's good.
Communism has cleared away a lot of religious beliefs.
Now, prior to communism, was it basically Buddhist?
There were three main philosophies or religions or cultures in China. There was Buddhism,
Yeah.
Confucianism, which actually
Okay.
is probably the largest, and Taoism.
Okay.
And they all mixed together. China's very interesting in that the culture and the people have been pragmatic in a deep way for thousands of years. They look for what is the most useful and what is the best teaching or practice or whatever and apply it. And it doesn't really matter where it comes from. There's a word eclectic, which I learned recently actually means picking the best and using it. It's an eclectic mix
Yes.
of religious principles. And personally, I'm very happy to see that because I know that if I offer some idea to somebody, some philosophy or something, they're going to look at it analytically. They're going to think about it for themselves.
Yes.
So I don't have to worry that they're going to become fanatical devotees to this concept that I explained poorly or that is half thought out or is my particular way of looking at things. They're going to figure it out for themselves.
Sound of lights, follow me. Gordy's this way. Yeah.
Yeah, they're very analytical and very pragmatic about things.
And of course, they have become very educated.
Yes. Yeah, education is very advanced in China.
Yes.
All the children, at least in the cities, are literate and good at analyzing things. We hear that the Chinese education system doesn't teach creativity, doesn't teach analysis, but I've found that my students, whether or not their teachers ask them to analyze things, are very capable of it. They're good at research, they're good at thinking about something for themselves. They're also very good at spouting back test questions, but that's not really what they want to do. That's just what they have to do for this education system that is slow to
Right.
catch on. But they're so smart. But again, I have to say that you might look at the Chinese education system and say, oh, it's discouraging creativity. But look at where it has come from. This is a country that even a generation ago had barely 50% literacy. And that's just basic literacy. So their goal was not, let's create a billion masterpiece artists. No, their goal was, let's get everybody to be basically literate and be able to investigate things for themselves because they can read.
Basically, the old reading, writing, and arithmetic.
Yeah. And they have done that so well. And that gives everybody the tools for whatever the next stage is.
Absolutely.
So the Confucian traditions and the Buddhism and Taoism, those are the three main philosophies or religions in China.
Okay.
And you'll find them fused in all sorts of different ways. And so you get these individual personalities that are attracted to one or the other of those three traditions. And every family will have some mix of them. And some of them disavow them completely during the revolutions.
Sure.
Yeah.
And some of them are rediscovering them. There will be a lot of situations where a grandparent has this Buddhist tradition or a Taoist past or something, and the grandchildren are rediscovering it. And the parents in the middle generation are just kind of watching the whole thing with a little bit of interest.
Yes. Yes, I have wondered that about the generations that actually had a religious form and then were told eliminate it.
Right.
Completely. And how that has to be an awful feeling of
Right.
I've
Yeah.
thought about that.
But then you get used to it and you're comfortable with it that way.
Right.
But one good thing about China is there's this very long family history that comes from the strong connections across many generations. You'll have these grandparents who are 60 or 70 years old who have a strong connection to a Confucius past or a Taoist past, and they'll be raising the children while the parents work.
Oh, okay. Right.
And that way you can get this continuity, even if it skipped a generation. The children have an opportunity, if they want, to rediscover these old traditions. And it's interesting, the government is actually pretty happy with that kind of thing. They're looking for that kind of experimentation. As long as you don't create, the Taoist revolution and go try to take over a province or two. If you're teaching your children morals, if the school system is exploring something like that, they're actually pretty happy with it because they're well aware of the problems of corruption. You ask a Chinese person, what's the biggest problem in China? They will always say, well, 2/3 of them will say environment. But if you really think about it, they'll look deeper and say, actually, the problem is the corruption, because corruption impinges on the environment. It creates problems economically. It actually touches everything. And so the government, its biggest campaigns are always for environmental protection and against corruption. And everybody knows that it's an internal struggle. Those two are tied together.
Sure.
And the only way you can deal with corruption in the long term, of course, is moral education of children. And so everybody is well aware of that. There's not the same kind of compartmentalization of, well, that's religion and this is school, and we can't really mix them. The fact that there's this eclectic tradition of picking out the best parts of everything kind of removes the defensiveness people feel about religion. They feel like, well, I'm just going to pick out the parts I like anyway, so I'm not threatened by you.
Yeah. Okay. Let's see here. We'll take a look at what's going on at the Baha'i Center in Urbana over these next few weeks.
On Tuesday evenings at 7 o'clock, there is a prayer and meditation meeting led by Joan Mills. Each Sunday morning at 10:30, there is a regular devotional program that includes Baha'i and other religious scriptural prayers and readings, and oftentimes music. On the fourth Sunday of each month, the devotional program at 10:30 will be followed by a potluck lunch at noon and game day, an afternoon for family-friendly fun and games for all ages. The Baha'i Center is located at 807 East Green Street in Urbana, a couple blocks east of Lincoln Square. It is located on the red bus line, and it is wheelchair accessible.
And so, do either of you know much about the history? You've both been from here, and I'm a newcomer. The early history of the faith in Urbana.
Oh, I love the Urbana Baha'i history. It's full of such great characters. Reverend Albert Vail has to be the first one. He was a Unitarian minister. He had opinions. He discovered the Baha'i faith. He came back, told his congregation about it, said, let's go. And half of them decided to form the Urbana Baha'i community. And to this day, somehow the Unitarian Universalist group on campus and the Baha'is have remained cordial. I mean,
Yes.
And later there was a woman, Garita Busey, who was a professor of English at the university, who for decades, her house was a Baha'i center. In fact, after she passed away, she left her house to the Baha'is. But more important than providing a physical presence, she provided a continuity and a reliable person you could always turn to if you're a student, or an anchor for the university-based Baha'i community.
And she was a Busey of the Busey Bank Buseys,
That's
wasn't
right.
she?
One of those Buseys, yeah.
Oh, that's great. Anything else, anybody?
This week is the observance of the martyrdom of the Bab. And Halim is setting one of the prayers of the Bab to music. He recently finished his doctorate of arts in music composition at the university. Right now he's raising 2 small children. And he says for recreation, he puts sacred texts to music.
Yes, I am so glad that he has, as he says, all of a sudden recently he just been on fire. And We're so glad that he has done this. So, okay, I think that covers everything as far as what's coming up shortly. Bill, it's been wonderful to have you here with us today and telling us about your experiences in China and your family background, so many interesting things. So in a few minutes, we're going to read a few Baha'i writings and hope you'll join us in that.
Of course, it's my pleasure to join you. All men have been created to carry forward an ever-advancing civilization. The Almighty beareth me witness, to act like beasts of the field is unworthy of man. Those virtues that befit his dignity are forbearance, mercy, compassion, and loving kindness towards all the peoples and kindreds of the earth. Say, O friends, drink your fill from this crystal stream that floweth through the heavenly grace of him who is the Lord of names. Let others partake of its waters in my name, that the leaders of men in every land may fully recognize the purpose for which the eternal truth has been revealed, and the reason for which they themselves have been created. Baha'u'llah.
Cleave ye at all times to the cord of trustworthiness, and hold fast the hem of the garment of truthfulness. Thus biddeth you he who is the truthful, the trusted one. God is my witness. Trustworthiness is a light that shineth refulgently from the heavens, and leadeth to the exaltation of the cause of God, the omnipotent, the incomparable, the all-praised. Whoso hath remained faithful to the covenant hath been steadfast in his adherence to trustworthiness, while those who have repudiated it have erred grievously. Baha'u'llah.
O Son of Being, thou art my lamp, and my light is in thee. Get thou from it thy radiance, and seek none other than me, for I have created thee rich, and have bountifully shed my favor upon thee. Baha'u'llah.
To find out more about Baha'i events taking place in Champaign-Urbana, or if you'd like to listen to previous New Lamp programs, you can go online to www.cu-bahai.org. Or if you would like to learn more about the Baha'i national and international community, go to www.bahai.us. Thank you again for joining us today. I hope you'll join us again next month. Goodbye.
Thanks for listening to this week's Weekend Heartbeat on WEFT Champaign 90.1 FM, Community Radio, Champaign-Urbana, Illinois, streaming live at www.weft.org.